What's up? What's happening? It's Namo Kofi Joe. You're listening to The Roof. The Roof. The roof is on fire. We don't need no water. This is AfricaOnTheMove.com. Go to AfricaOnTheMove.com. It's blowing up. There's a whole lot of things that you haven't seen that are on there now. It's been updated, new and improved. You can follow me on all the socials on Awakening Kinship. This is April 30th. I was trying to get it in before the end of the month. I should have done it a lot sooner, but you know how life goes. And so I'm just trying to make sure I meet that monthly commitment to this project, and keep y'all informed. If you were here last month, you noticed that there's been some changes to these paintings. I think last month I started them. They should be finished probably by the end of May. So it'll probably be something new then too. But yeah, I've been really happy with this work that I've been doing. It's it's bringing me bringing me a lot of joy. See that one back there? That one hasn't been finished, but it's close. And then the one here, and then the one here. Okay. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about them today. Today I'm gonna talk a lot about working in a series, and why I do it and what's important about it to me. But first, let's get back to what's going on around the world, what's happening in this global South, what's really going down. And I know you hear the news. I recommend not watching the news, unless you're looking at it from a very critical point of view, and understanding all of the dynamics behind putting the news together, and who really controls the media. And but I do watch the news. I do watch it. I watch a lot of news. I watch the capitalist news, and then I also watch the people that are kind of anti-capitalist on YouTube. And I just try to get a feel for what's really going down. And I always try to bring up Gaza. I always try to bring up the situation with Palestine and the people there, and what they're going through. I tend to every day post something about since October, whatever day that was. Israel said that this all began, which it really didn't. But since that day, I tried to post what they've done, and what their genocide and criminal behavior has caused. You see Kimmy back there. Kimmy's trying to get comfortable, so he's gonna scratch a little bit and move around. Kimmy, say hi to the people. Say something, huh? Well, yeah. So we're gonna get into this. The world that we're living in. I want to shout out to a friend of mine who gave. I've been trying to put together another series of paintings, but let me leave that. I'm gonna talk about that a little later. But the situation in Gaza, I think everyone should be posting something about that. It is a crime against humanity. What's going on there? And I sometimes try to think, like what it must be like to live in a war-torn city. Like what if the city that you lived in was constantly being bombarded until there was no more structures left, and the people had left, their homes, and they're living on, in tents, and then even the tents might get bombed, or there's a constant threat of violence that's around you. I try to put myself in the people's shoes, and try to, wonder what I would do. How would I act? How would that, how would that change the way I think about things? Because living here, you know, um, I think we are very distracted so that we don't have to think about that. So there's plenty of things that you watch or you can do, or you can sleep, in a bed, and you can go eat, you can go to a restaurant, and you can do all these things, without the threat of violence, on a day to day, on a regular, you know. Look at my belly, you know. Uh, there's so many things that I people would say that I should feel thankful for. I should be, happy. I should be happily ever after, you know. And I think that what that does is it's a lie. It's a lie for me. It's a lie to believe that, you know, that the world that I live in is not a result of what I do. And somehow or another, I don't have to blame myself, or I don't have to feel guilty, or I don't have to, feel any shame. I could just go along with life and act like, somehow or another, God, has, given me some certain privileges, you know. And this country, out of all countries, is set up, to this lie, to this myth, this fable, that somehow or another the things that it has created just, were just God given, we didn't have to do anything. They just popped into our laps. And I think that mentality keeps you in a state of mind that never really takes a good look at what has happened in this environment, in this, within your own heritage, you know, for you to think like that. And does it almost make you feel like you don't have to think about that, because really you're not going to do anything about it anyway. There's that, even understanding that there's a lie doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go out there after you understand the lie and do anything. You know, the lie is set up so that you can feel comfortable enough in it so that you don't have to worry about, why you do what you do, and then it's so much like, uh, I always, I've been to Africa, and when I was in Africa, I always admired that the people that I saw there. This is years. It's been years ago that I've done this. I've traveled to Africa, numerous times, but each time that I went, by living here and living in this type of, uh, comfort that I felt everybody should have, not just even some of the people here don't have, but even there's a lot of comfort that I do have here. And I used to look at the people, how happy that they were in, from my point of view, an abject poverty. Like how did they grow up in that kind of environment and still feel okay, knowing that the environment that I grew up in, I didn't feel okay in it, and it was still a whole, lot, you know, uh, uh, more material than theirs, and but theirs, without all of this material, didn't have any problem with still being happy. So I guess, when I think about, you know how much, damage, has happened in the world, that uh I don't think everybody understands it the way I do, but I'm sure that there are people that understand the price that has been put on happiness, that for no reason didn't need to be there. Like, solving the problems of the world for a lot of people is reducing people's lives to poverty so that their lives can be, ultra, you know, rich, compared to them. And that's solving the problems of the world. And it's hard for me to believe that you can't see anything differently than that. And what keeps you in seeing things that don't have you see things the way they are, illustrated or produced in the world, must keep you in a. This is getting to this word I've been trying to hold back on, but this kind of collection of funhouse mirrors. You know, uh, you must have a very distorted view of the world. Because there's no sense in people living below poverty line. Like, and then other people living like ultraly, excessively, richer than everyone else. That the both of those extremes, no matter which one you're on, you're sick. I mean, it's sickness. And it doesn't bring about peace. It doesn't bring about joy. It doesn't bring about happiness. But yet and still, you have to try to find some of that. And I'm sure that the rich people, that I'm looking at, are go through just as many problems as the people that I see, in on the streets of, Ghana, with hardly anything. That the the chaos in their minds is still there. The 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 containment of chaos is still there. And we, as a people of this world, should look at that, should look at the chaos and try to determine how can we look at this chaos? How can we breathe in this chaos? How can we, accept this air, and then build a society or build a world where everybody has to manage the same amount of chaos. Not some people thinking that they don't, and some people knowing that they do. I think that that's, where the world is heading. I think that's where people are eventually going to get to. I don't think that America is a leader in this. They're more of a, you know, problem of a sort. Like their consciousness is like my own, is somewhat distorted. And you know, I got a lot I could say about that, but I'm gonna wait till I get to the artwork. But like even Sudan, like I was reading something about Sudan or Mali, or any other parts of Africa where the conditions that have been laid in Africa started, in the interruption, with colonialism, when Africans started becoming slaves, when this land was stolen, when our hands were stolen. These things have been going on, if we look at it from that point of view, since the inception of this country. And there's no break in that. There, you can't separate out that from this. And some people do. I mean, some people, due to their education, due to what they believe is, important to them, I guess. But there's this idea that somehow or another, I don't have to think about that. I don't have to care about that anymore. That was over. That was over. That was in the past. And I'm wondering if you just looked at that from your day-to-day life, is that what you do? Like, can you disassociate yourself with what yesterday was just so that you can do what you do today? Um, and knowing that what happened yesterday is a result of what you're going to be doing today. And to me, there's no way of separating that. You know, you can't steal and rob and murder and rape people yesterday and act like today you didn't do it. Matter of fact, the results of you doing that yesterday are why you do what you do today. Now, are there consequences? Uh, yes. Is there, some truth to all of that? Yes. But the consequences for people who have gotten away with murder and rape and theft, the consequence is that they got away with it. And they got away with it because they set up the laws that prevented them, the criminal created a justice system, so that criminal's justice is never going to is always going to make him immune or impunity, right? He's never going to suffer the consequences because he set up the justice system, and there's many examples of people who believe that, uh, America is exceptional. It's that castle, or it's that something that sits on top of the hill. And you can go back and you can look at the economic conditions that were set. um, this idea of might is right, you know is basically saying that the bully wins. The bully has the pulpit. Um, the bully knows more than the person is subject to the bully's actions. And I think that is part of the problem. The other part of the problem, even if you do know that, even if you understand that, what are you doing about it? That's the other part of the problem. It's like a reflection in a mirror. Somebody created a mirror, and then somebody uses that mirror to see themselves. Like even this, is a mirror in some type of way, right? I'm able to see myself through a camera that projects that image onto a screen. And that reflection is important to me. That reflection is, how I look. What am I doing? What am I saying? All the reflection from this mirror. But the mirror was created, you know, and we can't, we can't, we have to balance that. The idea that I had to buy everything to make this reflection. And who sold it to me? Somebody who wanted to make sure we keep buying things, and that they reap, a whole lot more money out of the production of it than the people that actually use it. And that part of the mirror's production, and the people that have seen themselves or reflect from the mirror have to focus on the fact that this whole setup creates a dilemma. It creates a problem. It creates circumstances that have to be resolved. you know and the main one is that we have to change this whole operation. This whole operation is racist. It benefits a few. It makes people look at other people as being, other. They're not worthy. Not exceptional. And it makes some people want to be exceptional. And it also makes people very hateful of one another. And the idea of love is a is the idea of love doesn't go far enough. People are not kind enough to each other. Love is not that complicated, but love is complicated, especially when people use the word that is like for the love of money. Why do you love money? And your love of money may hurt people, harm people, and so, and make you want the things that the people that harm most people to get that money, you want that. You don't care about how they got it. You don't care about why they have it. You just want to have what they have. And if that's the way they did it, hey, that's fine with you. Go right ahead. You don't say that maybe there's something wrong with that distribution. It's unequal. But the other side of that is people say, but I like being on top. I like that feeling. I want to be, I want people on the bottom that I can look down on, and know that this is how I got there, and they did. So, we have the other problem of military. The military operates from a basis of we were ordered to do that. Never thinking that they're going to make those decisions on their own. They don't think like that. There are orders that they've been given, and the military operates under order. And they're very, you notice a military has people that will, bomb a building. They will, march into a town, fight another army, take, bombs from other people on top of them, because their whole state of mind is that they're fighting for somebody. And, militaries have probably existed, since the beginning of time. And they've never been the type of orders from the military's point of view that, because sometimes what happens even is the military chooses to follow different orders. So, the military, in the way we think, is always opposed, an opposition to somebody else, always in conflict that are made. There has to be a conflict. And if your military is bigger or stronger than someone else's, then you feel that you can take what you want, right? You can do what you please. But usually what happens in a war or happens with the military is the murder, the rape, the pillaging, whatever goes on, it's the aftermath that tends to be more, uh, detrimental. And then we come back to the whole, well, let's just forget of all that happened. Let's just forget that even happened, that was disorder, and now it's we with the military, we've organized it, right? We've or made it orderly, all that fragmentation, we've basically fragmented it even more, but but that fragmentation is no longer existing. So I'm kind of coming to the end of I'm a geopolitical, but this heading into May, you know, the workers have to, eventually take control. That has never happened in the world. That the workers run the world. I don't know if the workers would build a military, but if they did, the workers that built the military would have a say in how those, bombs are built, how much, the distribution of the, wealth of that industry, is distributed amongst the people that build those bombs. And I just believe that a world run by workers would want to keep working. They wouldn't want to kill anybody off so that they couldn't work. They would want to live in a society where we could work. And that's maybe for another day, another subject for another day. But we definitely need a world of workers. Period. Someone was telling me the other day is that there's a a certain class or the working class. Everybody can't be defined in the working class. Some people benefit from the working class, and then that's what they do. And I thought about artists. I thought about religious leaders. I thought about the military. You know, um, they all need workers. They don't do what workers do, but they need workers. And like I said, that might be a discussion for another day, um, because there's a lot to that. There's a lot entailed in that, and um, I'm not an expert. I can't get into it, from an expert point of view. I'm an artist. You know, I've been a worker. Matter of fact, I felt it was important for me not to just be an artist. I needed to know what it meant to work, and I've been working. A lot of times, a lot of the volunteer work was. I don't think we were producing much, but I think that the producing anything, but the idea of even the work that I did was a result of workers because I had a service job, and that service was provided because other people did the work. So I don't even know if I can consider it in the same vein of what I mean when I say we need to live in a worker society. I'm sure workers would want, you know, spiritual leaders and artists and firefighters. I don't know if they would need police officers and how they would deal with the military. But like I said, that's all for another day. We I'm at a point now where I got to talk about something else. All right, so today we're going to talk about series. Now, I went to school to be an artist, and so I tended to do art based on like how I was taught, you know, and I believe every artist is taught. Some people say they're self-taught, but even what that entails is what I have felt I have done. How else could I have been an artist if I wasn't self-taught? And I kind of have to question what even that means. But the idea that I went to school to be an artist, I learned certain things. Okay, and maybe that's being self-taught. You don't learn everything. Okay, that other you might learn in school. And I when I was in school, I tended to take a lot of different courses in art to find out what I like to do in art. And I did a lot of I took a lot of different art classes. And they weren't to test my work in what other sculpture and airbrush and watercolor, uh, you know industrial design, so because at the time I didn't know what kind of art I wanted to do, or maybe I did, but I wanted to see if it worked in all these other different types of forms. And I still do that today. um like with AI, or with the digital work that I do. um and I try to do it self-taught. I try not to feel like I got to go listen, even though that does help. Sometimes when I have listened to other people and listened to what they've done, and they've taught me some things, that those things have kind of contributed to my work. And I feel like it depends on what you want to do, or you know what you feel you have naturally, or what you feel like you need to learn. But I always felt like I had a natural, you know, ability to uh, draw things. Like I could look at something and I can draw it pretty good. I could, I can make you think that I saw that, object the way it actually looks. And so when I get to the point of series, that means for me is that I've taken an idea, a singular idea, and that idea could have a lot of different parts. But I can take that idea with all those different parts and create a bunch of different work, create from that idea. And so that's what I call a series. And that might be that one idea. This idea that I'm working on now has evolved, it's changed, but initially it was bend reality, and then after that it became bend back reality, or bend beyond reality. And then just recently, due to this sister friend of mine who uh, I respect and is very intelligent, uh, she threw in this word, unbending. And I said, ooh, I like that. Unbending, because I just thought that I was just going to bend reality, into something that I've learned from the past, or something that needs to be taken, that we can take from this into the future. But the whole idea of unbending reality meant that initially, which I had kind of really, really talked about, was things were bent. They were distorted. There was this idea that a collection of funhouse mirrors. And I thought, wow, that's kind of deep, to think about that somebody created a fun house. And I can remember as a kid going to the fun house, and I never did like the fun house mirror part of the you know amusement park, or I don't know. I think it was always a little. I always looked at the distortion in the glass, and it hasn't really lasted. I know there's probably things that they still do today that are similar to that. I'm sure they've taken it to a lot further, along. But the idea of uh, you know bending somebody's reflection to make them kind of short, or make them kind of fat, or make them kind of long, make them kind of wide. I don't know. I don't know if I thought that was somewhat of a horror, uh, but then to apply that same imagery, or reflection to the world that we live in. Um, this was kind of came to mind in that, and it might have been in the read the writing, because I don't even know the author of this bending the collection of funhouse mirrors. But the idea that as African people, we were on the continent of Africa, doing our thing, understanding the world, had a world view based on our reality to the world, to the, nature that we lived in. And then for somebody to come along and take over that and wanted you to forget that, made disorder of that, fragmented that, and then told you, or I shouldn't even say told you, they forced you in explaining who you were now from their language, from their culture, from who they were. That is somewhat of a mirror, a distortion, a funhouse mirror, a collection of them, because it was done in all these different types of ways. And I know that you might feel like I'm getting off this subject of a series, but I have taken, like, this series that I'm working on now wasn't the first one, but I have taken over the years, these past probably 10 years, the idea of a series very seriously. I've devoted, you know, depending on how far I want to take the idea, to a certain theme. The theme is the idea that I worked on. And so, like I said, this one is changed. This one now is unbend reality, bend back, bend beyond. I might even think that I don't know if I could say it, unbend reality, unbend back, unbend beyond. I think unbend initially is more important. Um, that means you would, when you bend back or when you bend beyond, that you have unbend reality. I don't know if it's necessary to say unbend three times, but I do believe that reality is bent, and it's bent on lies, and it's a reflection, you know, of our reality. It's the lie is a reflection of our reality, and we we have not yet come to grips with that. What that actually means, how it actually looks, and I think it's due to um, how well uh, people have uh, survived. You know, in this, there's no need in a lot of ways to you know bend back. And look at the world, you know, from a point of view that you know has left people in this state. Why should I? What purpose does that serve? And so I think for a lot of us, we got to we have to really see things differently. And so I think in this series of paintings, I've tried to show how how I am not looking through the funhouse mirror, if that makes any kind of sense. And that might be difficult for people to see what I'm doing if they're looking through the funhouse mirror. But so let me try to explain a little bit that in the work that I've been here. So here you see here this painting here. This is called Tree of Life. And I really like this picture. There's another picture that I did called Past, Present, and Future, where it has a similar theme of a tree, but not like this one. This one says to me that you have this tree that is in the shape or a form of a woman who sprouts a branch from that tree as her son. And above her, in her other branches, is this greenery, this foliage, this fullness, that's beyond the frame, the canvas's frame. Speaking the background being this light, right? And she's firmly rooted in the grass, in the green below. It's not finished, but that's where I'm going. But we don't. When people say that the tree of life, they tend to think of a woman who went to a tree and got an apple, and then gave that apple to a man. And then that was how, we weren't supposed to take a bite, eat the apple off the tree of life. And that tree of life was supposed to be, the reason why, we sinned, was because, and we saw ourselves naked, and, it was an explanation of, why we live in so much chaos, to be honest, to me. But this is kind of taking it a little different. This is not in any way, shape, or form about that. This is saying that there's a natural tree of life, right? Which is that there's Mother Earth. There's a mother that bore a child, and that mother, breath, has breathed into the entire world. That we wouldn't be living in this world if it wasn't for, this tree of life. This mother, mother of mothers. Okay. And so I mean, this is the unbending some reality, that we've kind of accepted and associated ourselves with. So that's one of the paintings. This one, I don't know if you can see that too well. This one is called, can you see that? This one I really like. This one, well, I like all my paintings, but I like this one for certain reasons too. But this one is called Whips Now Wage. So there's a very famous picture. It was taken back in 1863. It was spread all around the world. It was used by anti-slavery folk to understand what is going on, for at that time, maybe 300, 250 years, whatever. But it was a picture of a man who was whipped, and his back had all of these, scars and whelps from being whipped. And so it was a very famous picture. I think it was called Gordon or Peter or something like that. But anyway, he was sitting in a chair, and they just had his back turned to the camera, and it showed all of these whelps on his back scars. So I took that picture, I drew that picture, and applied it to a different idea, because the idea for me is that for one, what caused him to be whipped like that, right? Whatever caused him to be whipped like that, I felt still existed today. So if they were whipping him to do something that he wasn't willing to do, then today that same is done with wages, right? So his back, it hasn't been finished yet, but his back will have dollar signs and, currency and, exchanges and, anything that kind of reminds you or reflects on the economic condition that we're living in today. And I took him out of the picture that he was in and put him in a picture of a sense of Africa in the background, right? And Africa being, on one side, still developing, and on the other side, kind of more, underdeveloped, and one side more developed, but still in a marketplace. So this, he's in a market, whereas there was a market back then where they were auctioning off bodies. And then there's the market that we're in today where they're still auctioning off bodies, but you think that somehow or another, because you're getting paid, that it's not the same. It's different. But it still hurts. And it still leaves a mark, and it still, is not the way we should be living as a people. So that's what this is going to be about. And I'm trying to, as I grow in my work, I'm trying to keep a level of development in it. Like I don't want to be doing the same work that I was doing, 5 or 10 years ago. I want to be able to do some work that shows that I've, taken, certain things more into context, more into practice, and I just didn't abandon them, or the other point about that is I knew how to do some of those things and I just never did. So I want to add those into the pictures too. Like, yeah, okay, I could do that. I could add a little light and shade and, all those kind of things. I never felt like I really wanted to or had to, but as I grow, I feel like, if I never do them, how would people ever know that I knew how to do them, kind of thing? And so it's a little challenging because, it's this fight of trying to continue to do what I do, but then also, grow, and expand. So, yeah, so this one, is a bigger piece, and but it's in the same series. Somebody who told me that each one of these paintings look differently, but they still look the same as far as, my stylistic approach. And I like that. I'm glad people were able to see that, because I don't want to lose. Well, I don't think I can lose my stylistic approach. That's something that I had developed, and really, my stylistic approach is understanding what I do. That's really all my style is. It's just more and more believing in myself, thinking about what I'm doing in a way that is true, to my, belief system, or my, my emotion. Speaking of emotion, that's the next painting. So I don't know if you can see this one too well. Yeah. There it is. There it is. Uh-oh. So you see this painting? I like to say this painting pretty much speaks for itself. I could tell you what's in it. There's an ankh, there's a eye, all-seeing third eye, there's a nose, there's a lips, there's flames, there's smoke, Eventually, there'll be some air breathing through the nose and through the mouth. Uh, but this is entitled Eumosia and or Eumoia. But the idea is that uh, you know I did a painting a long time ago to try to draw what God looked like. Some people had told me, if you could see God, what would it look like? And it had a singular eye in the middle, and there were just all these flames coming up around it, and that was my impression of, if there was God, light, spirit, something like that. I forget the whole title of the name, but it had all of these things in it. And that was done a long time ago. And just recently, I came across this idea of uh, Umoja, and it's from South Africa, or the Bantu language, but it's trying to address something that I talked about earlier, was the idea that we as African people have forgotten, or have been kind of fragmented, or been in so much disorder that we have lost the foundational beliefs of who we are as a people. There's another painting in this series called Africanization. You'll see that probably next month. And it's kind of like in the same sense that no matter what we have been through, or whatever we've gone through, we've Africanized it. There was no way we couldn't. I think about the indigenous people of this land who were basically slaughtered, committed genocide. And still today, if you practiced any of the things that they practiced, or if you knew anything, that they've taken what has happened to them and have put it into a language that is benefited them, talked about who they are as a people, and those are the type of things that we need to be very clear on, is that uh, um, we have been conditioned to believe that somehow or another all that was lost. All of what we ever became is no longer. I could talk to some Africans today, and they say, I ain't African. And I just got to sit there and look at them. Now, lately I just feel like I just got to learn how to breathe, because what they talking about is their conditioning. And they'll go into a long explanation about why they ain't African. And I'll just sit there and listen and go, I really don't have nothing to say, because that is what has happened to them. They have been conditioned to believe that they ain't African. And I gotta go along with that, under that, because if I told them that that's only been a condition that's made you believe that or think that way, they probably wouldn't even understand what I'm talking about. Because what are you talking about? What kind of condition? Well, the condition was that you no longer speak your language, you no longer have a home, you believe that what has happened to you was justified, and was the God brought it to you, Jesus, all this kind of stuff. And uh Muhammad, whoever. But the sad part about all that is that is their truth. That You can't argue with that. That's who they are. You know, they can't do better. They know no better. That's the way they behave. And uh, that conditioning has, been something that I learned back in college was important for this society. You know, um, but I always question the fact that there were some of us that wasn't about to be conditioned, and a lot of people, we weren't willing to look at ourselves through the funhouse mirror. Okay, so I try to carry that tradition, right? Because those people got killed. Okay, those people got, they were ostracized. They were made to believe that they were crazy or whatever. You know, and and I try to, keep in mind that some, what is considered crazy sometimes is actually what this society might label as somebody who's a terrorist. You know, but I look at it as being fighting for my liberation. Because if this is normal, if it's normal for people to have this outrageous wealth, you know, and other people live in these abject, poverty conditions, and that ain't crazy. I don't know what is. Okay, I don't even know what is. That's crazy to me, you know. And for you to call me crazy because I wanted to change all that, you know, just because I don't accept the conditioning of that, you know, I think we're gonna have a problem, you know. we are, and I think we should all look at that as a problem. But a lot of us don't. A lot of us see it as, I can't do anything about it. I'm like, well, yes, you can. You can stop thinking that way. You could talk to other folk. You could build differently. You could work at things differently. Uh, and it ain't gonna happen overnight. I understand that. When people tell you, though, it ain't a marathon. I mean, it ain't a sprint. It's a marathon. You know, I have a little question. I'll be honest. I got some problems with that one though, because the difference between a sprint and a marathon are like rich and poor. And if we gonna wait for the rich, to change, we gonna be waiting we gonna wait longer than a marathon. And and if we gonna wait for the poor to sprint, we gonna be waiting just as long. Okay, because they ain't ready neither. Okay, and so we got to get out of that type of mentality, that type of thinking, and start putting things to work. So we coming up on the end of this, y'all. It's been good. It's been good. I thought I wasn't gonna get it at the end this month. I got it in, but we did it. Okay, we got this hour. And you can turn it off. You can go do what you got to do. But this is Damo Kofi Joe. This is AfricaOnTheMove.com. Go to AfricaOnTheMove.com. I've been working on some things. I've been putting some things together. Matter of fact, I created an AI page. So I got all this AI stuff that I've been doing. And I really need to get back into talking about that too. But the AI page is up. I've updated put some new poetry up there. I put some new geopolitical things going on up there. I've been had a little time off, and so I've been able to put that to use. Put that into a lot of use at the work. You can go to all my socials on Awakening Kinship. Okay, that's all you gotta do. Look for Awakening Kinship, and you will find me. On all my socials. But if you go to Africa on the Move, I have a link to all my socials on the Linktree page. You can go that way too. So people, hopefully I'll catch y'all a little earlier in the May. And, African Liberation Day is in May. If you don't know now, you need to get out there. You need to be a part of that. You need to escape this trauma, escape this nonsense. The roof is on fire. The roof is on fire. Okay. The roof is on fire. Okay. Stop looking for water. Okay. We don't need no water. Okay. Let this burn. Let it burn. Okay. Just let it burn out of your head, out of your soul, out of your mind. All right, peoples. Undying love. Forward ever. Backwards never.